We're going to be taking a southbound journey along the east coast on US 1. Come on, let's go! Alright everyone, today we're finishing up the Great US 1 series by doing the Southbound Supercut of US 1, where we're going to be starting all the way up in Fort Kent, Maine, and travel all 2,300 miles south to Key West, Florida. And just like the northbound Supercut, I did include the US 23 concurrency this time, so we will be seeing that portion of the highway once again. So, let us get started once again with the Great US 1. But first, you're watching the TheDerpHog, where I make highways content on all sorts of different topics. If you've been enjoying it, be sure to hit that like button. And if you've been really enjoying it, be sure to smash that subscribe button so you're notified on all future videos. And if you really want to help out the channel, become a member today, where you get custom cool emojis, early access to future videos, along with one free extra request per month. And if you don't want to become a member, you can always just pay $3 for a intersection request in future videos. Those highways will be listed down in the description below, and I'll make sure to shout you out when that video releases. So let's get on with the highway. As you can see here, this is the map of US 1 once again, as this time we're going to be starting all the way up here in Fort Kent, Maine, and travel through all the states all the way down to Key West, Florida, where we end at the famous Mile Zero marker in Key West. So with that, I'm going to be talking about southbound US. So we actually begin here in Clare, New Brunswick, Canada, where we do get a cool sign for US 1 on the American side, as we're now getting signed for Fort Kent, which makes sense. And then once you cross over the St. Johns River, we get a first direction sign with Caribou and Madawaska as our next places we pass through. And here in Madawaska, we're now getting signed for Caribou solely from only 20 miles away, which is a good choice. And here in Caribou, we're now getting signed south for Fort Fairfield and Presque Isle. And Presque Isle, we're now getting signed for Mars Hill from 15 miles away. I mean, from Presque Isle, I think you should start signing Holton, because Holton is way more famous than Mars Hill. And plus, Holton is where we meet the northern terminus of the Great Interstate 95. But luckily, here in Mars Hill, we're now getting signed south for Holton, which definitely is a good choice. Here we meet the Great Interstate 95, or near its northern terminus here in Holton. And for some reason, we do not have any control cities right at these poles here. And after meeting Interstate 95, we meet with US Highway 2, and we're now going to be heading through downtown Holton here. And here is where we split off from US Highway 2, as US 2 will take you up to Woodstock, New Brunswick, while we're going to be heading south towards Calais from a good 89 miles away. Again, passing through rural Maine. And this here we get another mileage sign with Topsfield from 21 miles away, and Calais still as our primary from 57. And here we meet Main Route 6 once again in the middle of nowhere, Maine. And after passing Main Route 6, we get another mileage sign with Calais still as our primary from 36 miles away. Here on the outskirts of Calais, we meet with Main Route 9, and US 1 and Main Route 9 are now going to be concurrent with each other. And we can see that we're now getting signed for Machias as our primary from 60 miles away. I mean, sure, Machias is a pretty big town, but I'd also have to start seeing Ellsworth, because if they can sign Calais from Ellsworth, then you can do Ellsworth from Calais. But here in Machias, we're now getting signed for Harrington as our primary from 15 miles away. But once we get to Harrington, we're now getting signed for Ellsworth from 44 miles away. So I kind of think that you should just sign Ellsworth from Calais. Here in Ellsworth, we meet with Main Route 3 here, and we're now going to be heading towards Bucksport, Maine. And this here is actually in Bucksport, and we do have an error shield. And I actually did feature this error here in the error shield videos part 1, if you want to check that out in the top right corner here. And let's see if Maine fixed this error. Apparently not, because they just, for some reason, removed the shield entirely or just fell off. Anyways, here in Bucksport, we're now getting signed for Belfast as our next town. And then here in Belfast, main Route 3 splits off from us as it's going to head towards Augusta, as we're now getting signed south for Camden and Rockland from a good distance. And then here in the Rockland area, we're now getting signed for Bath from 34 miles away. I mean, Bath is a pretty big town, but it's also right really close to Brunswick. You can start signing Brunswick now. And here in downtown Brunswick, we meet with US Highway 201, and for some reason they mention it going southbound on US 1. And then we're now meeting with Interstate 295, where we're going to be paralleling it, and if you want to get to US 1, you'd be taking a left turn here. Once again, here in the Falmouth area, we meet the Falmouth Spur, which will take you over to Interstate 95, and it just gets the same control cities as we saw going northbound on US 1. And here in Portland, we're going to be joining with Interstate 295, and we're going to be concurrent with it as we head through downtown Portland. And here we meet with US Highway 302 once again, and we're now getting signed south for South Portland, interestingly. Why not just a control C on Interstate 95? And when we split off from Interstate 295, we just get a Kentucky treatment, while 295 is being signed south for South Portland and Scarborough. Personally, that Scarborough should be with us, while 295 should be signed south for South Portland and Portsmouth. No need for Scarborough on 295. And here in the Scarborough area, we're now getting signed for Saco as our next control city from 8 miles away. And we can see that main Route 9 has rejoined with us. And here in Saco, we now getting signed for Biddeford and Old Orchard Beach as our next control cities, as remaining Interstate 195. Here in Biddeford, we also mean main Route 111 here, and even though it's not mentioned on this control city sign, main 111 is the route that will take you over to Lyman, Maine. And I skipped all the way down to Kittery, we're meeting with Interstate 95 proper, getting signed for Portsmouth and Boston respectively, while we're going to be heading into Portsmouth respectively. In fact, here's that drawbridge as we're heading into downtown Portsmouth. And on the other side, we enter straight into downtown, and we get a cool view here of this cool building. And after going through downtown, we meet with New Hampshire 16 and US Highway 4 once again. And here we get a pull through in the Portsmouth area, as we're now getting signed south for Hampton and Seabrook, which are two towns in New Hampshire. Normally, I'm kind of against this stuff, but since it's faster to get to take Interstate 95 to places beyond these two towns, I'm okay with both Hampton and Seabrook just being mentioned here. And then here in Seabrook, we're now getting signed south for Salisbury, which definitely is a good choice. And we now are entering into the state of Massachusetts, where we just get a very, very, very lame welcome sign. Actually, this is from Street View from like 2017. There is no current sign as of this day, sadly. And then here we're now getting signed south for Newburyport in Salisbury. And here in Newburyport, we're now getting signed for Raleigh and Boston, which are awesome choices. I do like that Boston. And skipping ahead to the Peabody area, meet with Interstate 95 and Route 128, and they just get signed for Waltham and Worcester once again. And here we cross over the Tobin Bridge as we're about to enter into downtown Boston. In fact, on the other side of the bridge, we get a very cool view of the Boston skyline as we're heading into the city. And they're now going to be joining with Interstate 93, getting signed south for downtown Boston and Cape Cod. And after going through downtown, we're splitting off from Massachusetts Route 3, which will take you to Cape Cod, while we're going to be heading towards Providence and to Interstate 95. And here is the ending to Interstate 93, as we're now going to be joining with Interstate 95 to form a 3-ish mile wrong-way concurrency here. And then we split off from Interstate 95 as we're now getting signed south for Norwood, which is literally the town we're directly in, so why can't you do Foxborough, Mass.? That'll be better. And here in Foxborough, we'll meet the road that will take you over Gillette Stadium here, so that is cool. And then here we meet with Interstate 495 once again, and it just gets the same control cities. And we can see here that on 495 we're now getting signed south for North Attleboro. And here in the North Attleboro area we meet with Rhode Island and Massachusetts 295, and they get the same control cities as we saw going on northbound 1. And we now are getting signed south for Pawtucket, Rhode Island, which is a good choice. And here we are entering into Pawtucket, and we sadly do not have a Welcome to Rhode Island sign or a Pawtucket city limits. And after going through downtown Pawtucket, we're now going to be joining with Interstate 95 as we head towards downtown Providence. And here in downtown Providence, we split off from Interstate 95 to head through downtown here. We're also going to be concurrent with Rhode Island Route 15. And here in the heart of Providence, we're meeting with US Highway 44, as 1 south and 44 west are going to be heading a right here, while 44 east will be taking to Interstate 195. Here is where US 44 splits off from US Highway 1 here, as US 1 is now going to be heading south towards Newport and New London. And on our way out of the city, we pass by US Highway 6 once again, which will take you over to Interstate 95. And here we meet Rhode Island Route 2 here, as US 1 is going to be continuing south towards Newport. And on our way out of the Providence area, we pass by the International Airport once again here. And here at a random junction, we're now getting signed south for Jamestown and Wakefield. And I looked it up, and Wakefield is actually a village within South Kingstown, Rhode Island, so I don't know why they're favoring the village over the actual city, so you can just sign South Kingstown here, Rhode Island, not the village. And here we meet Rhode Island Route 4, as we're now going to be heading south towards South Kingstown and Newport and New London. And here we meet Rhode Island 138 once again, which will take you over to Newport. And here we meet Rhode Island Route 78 here into Westerly, as US 1 will be heading through downtown Westerly. And here is the Rhode Island and Connecticut border, as we're now entering into Stonington, Connecticut. And here in the Stonington area, we meet with Connecticut Route 2, which will take you over to Interstate 95. And here's an oddity. I don't know what to call this exactly. I'm just going to call this a mileage sign, because this is a couple, like a little ways up the road from our last junction, but it doesn't have any numbers for a true mileage sign. It just have arrows instead, so I don't know what to call this. And you can't call it a direction sign because we're not at a junction. We're, like I said, a couple miles beyond our last junction, so what would you guys call this? Anyways, here in the New London area, we're going to be joining with Interstate 95 as we cross over the Thames River. And on the other side, US 1 will take you into downtown New London, as Interstate 95 will take you to New Haven. And this is here in the New London area, as we're now getting signed south for Old Lyme, which makes sense. And then here in the Old Lyme area, we'll meet with Interstate 95 once again as we head towards New Haven. And then we split off from Interstate 95 as we're now getting signed south for Old Saybrook, while 95 is getting signed for New Haven and New York City, which is good choices. And then between Old Saybrook and New Haven, we just parallel Interstate 95, and I'm not going to be mentioning all the cities that US 1 should get signed for. Anyway, skipping ahead to the New Haven area, we do not have any access to Interstate 91 or US Highway 5 here, but we do get a cool view of downtown New Haven, so that is awesome. And then skipping ahead to Bridgeport, we're meeting with Connecticut's Route 8 and 25 once again. And then this here is in Norwalk, where we're meeting with US Highway 7. And that 7 is not centered at all. It's like too far to the, or it's a little ways to the right. And skipping ahead to Stamford, we're meeting one of the state routes here in downtown Stamford. And then finally, after going through Greenwich, we're now entering back into the state of New York with our... So we begin here at the New York and Connecticut state line, and even despite we're still in the New York City metro area, we actually do get a Welcome to New York sign. Well done, New York. And our first major junction is Interstate 287 once again, and it looks like that we're now getting signed south for Rye. And here we meet with Interstate 95 here, and like we saw on northbound, we're just getting signed for the Pelhams. And here we meet the Hutchinson Parkway, which is getting signed south for Whitestone Bridge and north for nothing for some reason. And here we meet the Bronx River Parkway here in the heart of the Bronx, as we just get a South US 1 pull-through for some reason. Here's where we reunite with Interstate 95, as we're now getting signed for the George Washington Bridge. I mean, you could put Newark for US 1, or you could put an actual control city in New York. Now we're meeting with Interstate 87, getting signed for Queens and Albany once again, and we now get a control city of Newark. And I forgot to mention this in the going northbound, but this is where US 9 splits off from us, so here is where it rejoins. And on the other side of the George Washington Bridge, we're now splitting off from Interstate 95, and it looks like Interstate 80 gets a mention here, so that is awesome. While we're going to be joining with US 46 to head through Jersey City. Here's where we split off from US 46, as it's being signed for the New Jersey Turnpike, while we just get signed south for Broad Avenue. On our way out of the metro area, we meet with the Long Island Expressway once again. And here's the Pulaski Skyway, as US 1 and 9 are crossing it. And here we get an awesome view of Interstate 95 here, so that is cool. And then on the other side of the bridge, we're now re-meeting with Interstate 78 and the eastern terminus of US 22, as we're now getting signed south for Elizabeth. In fact, here's a more detailed map of what is all happening here. And here's Interstate 278, and sadly this direction we do not have a interchange with it because where 19 meets Interstate 278, it's a wide junction. And then here's where US 9 splits off from US Highway 1, as they're now getting signed south for Trenton, which is a good choice, while US 9 is getting signed south for the entirety of the Jersey Shore. Interesting. And then here, on our way towards Trenton, we meet with the Garden State Parkway once again. And here's our second meeting with Interstate 287, as it's been signed for Morristown, and as we're still getting signed south for Trenton still. Here we meet with US Highway 130 getting signed for Camden, while we're still getting signed south for Trenton. And here in the Trenton area, we meet with Interstate 295, it gets signed for Philly, while southbound 295 gets signed for Camden. And here we meet the US 1 business route, which will take you into downtown Trenton, while US 1 proper is getting signed for Philly? New Jersey is signing Philly? This is awesome! Well done, New Jersey! This is a rare W! In fact, on our last pull-through in the state of New Jersey, we're still getting signed for Philly. Well done! And then on the other side of the Delaware River, on the Pennsylvania side, we're now getting signed for Philly. That is cool, PennDOT. You're finally doing something good again. Here we meet with US Highway 13 getting signed south for Tullytown and Bristol once again. And here we meet with Interstate 295, as it's also getting signed for Philly too. And then here we meet with Interstate 276 once again, and we're still getting signed south for Philly. And here in the heart of the Philly, we're reuniting with US Highway 13, and US 1 and 13 are now going to be concurrent. Honestly, if US 13 has a short concurrency with US 1, why can't it just not end where they split off at the southern meeting instead of US 13 being concurrent with 1 and then going by itself and then ending in Morristown? It just seems weird. And here's where we say goodbye to US 13 officially, as we're still getting signed south for the Roosevelt Expressway now. Here we meet with Interstate 76, as we're now getting signed for Valley Forge. Harrisburg, that should be Harrisburg. And we split off from Interstate 76, and we're now getting signed south for City Avenue. I prefer to see maybe like Media, or Kennett Square, or Rising Sun, or Bel Air, anything but a Kentucky treatment. And here we are now meeting with US Highway 30, which I just now saw that it's being signed as Lancaster Avenue. Here we meet with Interstate 476 here, and it's just getting the same control cities as we saw northbound. And we can see now we're getting signed south for Lima, which is also another unincorporated community. PennDOT, why? And then here we are now meeting with US Highway 322, as 322 and US 1 are going to be concurrent as we head towards Kennett Square and Westchester. And here's where we split off from US 322, and we also meet US 202 here, as we're now getting signed for Kennett Square. And then here in the Kennett Square area, we get a mileage sign with Oxford on the top line and Rising Sun now as our primary. And here in the Oxford area, we meet with Pennsylvania Highway 10, and we can see now we're now getting signed south for Rising Sun. I mean, I prefer to see Bel Air because Bel Air is way bigger than Rising Sun, and Rising Sun is just the first town in Maryland. Also, if you want to check out a video on Pennsylvania 10, it's in the top right corner, and it's made by Quantumon 437. And then a couple miles down the road, we're now entering into the state of Maryland, so let us see what Maryland has to offer on southbound. In our first mileage time, we get Lancaster as our primary from 38 miles away. MDOT is favoring US 222 here? This is awesome! And then here in Rising Sun, we're getting signed for Baltimore. I mean, that is also a good swing, but Bel Air isn't also a bad choice. And here in Conowingo, we meet with US 222, the southern terminus of the highway, as we're going to be continuing towards Bel Air. And before we cross the Susquehanna River, we're meeting with Maryland Highway 222 here, and I just like this awesome view of the river from this point on US 1. And here in the Bel Air area, we meet with Maryland 24 once again, and it's very strange to see an ampersand on a pull fruit here. I've never seen that before. Anyway, skipping down to the Baltimore area, we meet with Interstate 695 once again on the north side of Baltimore, as it's been signed for Towson and Essex once again. And then here in the heart of Baltimore, we meet with Maryland Highway 2 here. And we also meet with Interstate 83, which just gets the same control cities as we saw last time. And here we meet with US Highway 40, still in the Baltimore area. And then on the south side of Baltimore, we meet with Interstate 695 here, which is still getting signed for Towson for some reason. And here we meet with Interstate 195, and once again, this picture was also taken by Tiger Raven, so thank you for all these pictures in the Elkridge area. And here we go under Interstate 895, as we do not have a direct interchange with it going southbound on US 1. And here we meet with Maryland Highway 100, which is getting signed the same control cities that we saw on northbound US 1. And this junction was requested by Tiger Raven because he lives near this highway in the Elkridge area, so thank you for that request. And then on our way towards DC, we meet with Maryland Highway 200 here, and I'm like 90% sure that I've been on the Interstate 370 portion of this road. And as we're about to enter into the DC metro area, we meet with the Capital Beltway here, getting signed south for Richmond and north for Silver Spring and Baltimore. And here in College Park, we actually pass by the University of Maryland campus here. And this here is our last junction with Maryland Highway 410 before we enter into Washington, D.C. And going this direction, we do get a Welcome to Washington, D.C. sign, so well done. And here's our first major junction at 6th Avenue with US Highway 29. And then here we meet with US Highway 50 once again at New York Avenue. And we can actually see the United States Capitol building from US 1 and 50, so that is also cool. And I've actually been inside that building. I actually got a tour from one of the state representatives, so when I went there in 2017. And this is where US 1 leaves US Highway 15 as it's going to be turning onto 14th Street here. And here's where we reunite with Interstate 395 as we're now getting signed south for Richmond. And here's where we split off from Interstate 395 as we're now getting signed for a lot of stuff with Alexandria. And here is downtown Alexandria on US Highway 1. And we're now meeting with the Capitol Beltway once again as we're now getting signed south for Fort Bolivar. And then here we get another pull through with Fort Bolivar still as our primary. For our next mileage time, Fredericksburg actually becomes our secondary, while we get Richmond now as our primary. So why in the world was Fort Bolivar signed then? And then here we meet the Fairfax County Parkway as we're exiting out of the DC metro area and heading towards Fredericksburg. And then skipping all the way down to Fredericksburg, we meet with US 1 Business and 17 Business, which will take you into downtown Fredericksburg, while 1 Proper is going to be heading towards Richmond. Here we meet Virginia Route 3 in the heart of Fredericksburg, which will actually take you into downtown going eastbound, and westbound takes you to Culpeper. And guess what Virginia Route 3 is? Hey, I know this highway. Virginia Route 3 is a 151-mile state highway located in northern Virginia, and it runs from Culpeper to junction with US 15 Business and 522, all the way over to US 17 Business and Booster Courthouse. It is one of the many Virginia scenic byways, and along the route we get to pass by the Chancellorsville Battlefield, along with the Spotsylvania Town Center and the famous Central Park Outlet Plaza. Some major intersections along this highway include US 15 proper, US 301, US 522, the Great US 1, Interstate 95, and many others. It also intersects 1 Business, which will take you to downtown Fredericksburg. That's a little bit about Virginia 3, and let us get back to the Great US 1. Now we're meeting with Virginia Highway 208 once again as we're getting signed for Richmond, and 208 is getting signed for Spotsylvania Courthouse. On our next mileage time, we still get Richmond as our primary from 53 miles away. And now we're meeting with Interstate 95 and US 17 at exit 126 once again. And this is where US 17 splits off from US Highway 1, and we're not going to be continuing towards Richmond. Skipping all the way down to the Richmond area, we'll meet with Interstate 295, and it just gets the same control cities that we saw northbound. And here's where we reunite with US Highway 301 as US 1 and 301 are now going to be heading through Richmond. And our first major junction with the concurrency is Interstate 95 and 64 as they're getting signed for Petersburg and Norfolk. Personally, I like to see Durham for 95 South because of Interstate 85, but that Norfolk is good for Interstate 64. And then here in the heart of downtown Richmond, we meet with US Highway 250 here. And then on the outskirts of Richmond, we now get a mileage sign with Raleigh now as our primary from 151 miles away. But the downside is that for some reason US 1 is missing from this concurrency, because US 301 does not go to South Hill or Raleigh. And here we meet with Virginia Highway 288, which personally I think should become Interstate 864. And this is where we split off from US Highway 301, and it looks like VDOT has made an error as this is supposed to be Virginia Highway 36. Come on VDOT, you're not in the Midwest. Stop going out west. And on our way out of Petersburg, we meet with Interstate 85, getting signed the same control cities. as we just get a pull-through for 1 southbound here. And then here we meet with Business 460 as we're now getting signed for Dinwiddie. I mean, in the original US1 video, I did complain Dinwiddie being signed on US1, but then I looked that up and it's actually one of the biggest places that we're passing through between South Hill and here, so it kinda makes sense because, again, US1 is a local road, and I doubt anyone would be taking all of US1 down to South Hill. And then the next mileage sign, we still get South Hill and Raleigh mentioned here. And then here in the Dinwiddie area, we meet with Virginia Highway 40, as 40 will take you over to Blackstone and Waverly. And here we meet with Interstate 85 on the outskirts of South Hill. And this is where we reunite with US Highway 58, and US 1 and 58 are going to have a short concurrency. In fact, our next mileage sign, we are still getting Raleigh as our primary from 76 miles away. And this is where we split off from US Highway 58, as US 1 is going to be continuing south towards Raleigh. And our last mileage sign of the video, we get North Carolina State Line on the top line, and Raleigh still as our primary. All done be done. And we begin at the North Carolina and Virginia border here with a Welcome to North Carolina sign. And always down the road, we meet with Interstate 85, getting the same control cities as we saw on northbound US 1. And here we get our first mileage sign with Henderson from 22 miles away. I mean, since we are now concurrent with US Highway 401, it kind of makes sense because even though both roads do take you to Raleigh, it might depend on which way is faster to get there. And here's where US 401 splits off from US 1 as we're now getting signed for Henderson still. For our next mileage sign, we actually get Raleigh on the bottom line from 59 miles away, which is awesome. And here's where we split off from US Highway 158 as we're going to be heading south towards Raleigh. And here we get another mileage sign with Raleigh still as our primary from 37 miles away. And a little ways closer, once we get there, we're now getting Sanford as our primary from a good 63 miles away. And then here in the North Raleigh area, meet with Interstate 540 as it's getting signed for Durham. And we're going to be heading into downtown Raleigh. And here we reunite with US Highway 401 once again, as we're now going to be heading south towards downtown. But we actually don't make it to downtown, instead we hop onto Interstate 440 here, as we're now getting signed for Sanford. And here we meet with US 70 and North Carolina 50 once again. And now we're meeting with North Carolina 54, along with the Wade Avenue Freeway, which will take you over to Carter Finley Stadium and Lenovo Center. Here we meet with Interstate 40 once again, and make me skip this. And here we get a pull through for US 1 and 64 as we're now getting signed for Apex, Sanford, and Asheboro. I like that. And here's where we split off from US 64 as it's getting signed for Pittsboro and Asheboro. In our next mileage sign, we still get Sanford as our primary from 34 miles away. And here we meet with North Carolina 55 once again. Now we're meeting with the Triangle Expressway or North Carolina 540 as we just get a pull through again for Sanford. And at random junctions, US 1 is still getting signed south for Sanford. And our next mileage, once we get closer to Sanford, Southern Pines now becomes our primary from 42 miles away. And here's exit 79 once again, which is a shortcut over to Pittsboro. And then after exit 79, we get another mileage sign with Southern Pines now as our secondary, and Pinehurst as our primary from only 1 mile away. Like, come on NC-Dot, you can just either choose Southern Pines or Pinehurst. Or if you want a longer control distance city, do Rockingham. I do not want to see this three-liner with the control cities be only 1 mile apart from each other. And then slightly further up the road, we get another mileage sign, and Southern Pines does become our primary once again, from only 31 miles away this time. And we're meeting with 15501 as we're now going to be concurrent with it as we head through Sanford. And here we meet with US 421 once again. And we're now meeting with North Carolina Highway 42 before 15501 splits off from us. And our next mileage time, we still get Southern Pines as our primary from 26 miles away. And this is where 15501 splits off as it's being signed for Pinehurst and Carthage, while we're still getting Southern Pines. And here in the Cameron area, we meet with North Carolina 24 and 27, and they just get the same control cities that we saw in Northbound. And here we get a 3-liner here with Rockingham now as our primary from 38 miles away. I mean, sure, this might seem provincial, but Rockingham is actually bigger than Cheraw, so I kind of agree with this choice here. And this here is in the Aberdeen area where 15501 is splitting off from us for good as they're getting signed for Rayford and Laurinburg, while we're now getting signed south for Rockingham. Our next mileage time, we now get Cheraw as our primary from 32 miles away, which is a good choice because we're only 10 miles from Rockingham. And then here in the Rockingham area, we meet with US 220 here. And our last major junction in the state of North Carolina is US 74. And we get one more mileage time. We get Columbia? Columbia from 99 miles away. So not only is NC signing Virginia's capital at the North Carolina-Virginia state line, now they're signing South Carolina's capital at the Carolina state line. So this is a rare W and awesome moment here, NC. And we're now entering into the state of South Carolina, so let us see if South Carolina sticks with it. And now we get an even awesomer mileage sign with Columbia on the bottom line and Charlotte being mentioned because of South Carolina 9. This is awesome! And here we meet with US Highway 52 as 52 and 1 are now going to be heading out of Cheraw and towards Columbia. Now I do not like this at all here because US 52 is getting signed for Society and Hill and Florence, while we just get signed for Camden. If US 52 gets 2 cities, then why can't we get Camden and Columbia? Come on, SC Dot, you're doing so well. And here in the Camden area, we meet with 521 and US Highway 601 respectively. And here's where we split off from US Highway 601, as it will take you over to Interstate 20, as they're getting signed for Columbia and Orangeburg respectively, while we get Elgin now as our primary. I mean, it kind of makes sense because people would probably be taking Interstate 20 again to get to Columbia from here. So Elgin is a pretty good choice for one. And then here in the Elgin area, we meet with Interstate 77, getting signed north for Charlotte and south for Charleston. And here we meet with US 76 and 378 as we head through downtown Columbia. And here we get an awesome view of the Columbia skyline as we're up on this hill here. And here in downtown, we actually meet with US 21 and 321 here, along with US 176. And on the other side of the river, we meet with Interstate 26 as it's getting signed for Greenville, Spartanburg, and Charleston, respectively. And now meeting with Interstate 20 once again as it's being signed for Augusta and Florence again. And here we say goodbye to US 378 forever as we're now getting signed south for Aiken. In our next mileage time, we do get Aiken as our primary from 45 miles away. Here in Batesburg, Leesville, we meet with US 178 here as we're still getting signed south for Aiken. And here in Aiken, we're meeting with US Highway 78 and we're now getting signed south for Augusta, which is awesome. And on our way to Augusta, we meet with US 278 and 278 and 25 are now going to be current as we head towards downtown Augusta. And here we meet with Interstate 520 getting signed for Columbia and Atlanta. And we're now entering into the state of Georgia after crossing over the Savannah River here. And this exit here will take you into downtown Augusta. And here we say goodbye to US 25 as US 25 will be heading down towards Brunswick. And here's where we split off from US Highway 78 as we're now going to be heading towards Rennes and Louisville. And on our way out of Augusta, we meet with Interstate 520 here, getting signed for Columbia and Atlanta. Our next Malachon, we get Rennes from the top line and Louisville, Georgia as our primary now from 43 miles away. And here in the Rennes area, we meet with US Highway 221 and 221 and US 1 are now going to be concurrent. Our next Malachon, we now get Waverly as our primary from 25 miles away. Strange. For our next Malachon, we now get Swainsboro from 31 miles away. So why couldn't Swainsboro just get on that last mileage time? Here in Swainsboro, we meet with US Highway 80 once again. And we now get Lyons on the top line and Baxley now is our primary from 59 miles away. Here we are meeting with Interstate 16 in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. And we're now meeting with US Highway 280 in Lyons as we're now getting signed south for Baxley. But our next Malachon, we get now Alma as our primary from 49 miles away, which I think is an alright choice because that is a relatively sizable town and it's where we meet with US 23. And on our way to Baxley and Alma, we actually passed by Santa Claus, Georgia, which I did feature in the Christmas video if you want to check that out in the top right corner here. And here we are meeting US Highway 341 in Baxley as we're now getting signed south for Alma and head towards US 23. In our next Malachon, we actually now get Waycross as our primary from 45 miles away, which that's awesome. And it looks like GDOT is up to their old tricks again and is now having Blackshear as our primary, but that's for Georgia Highway 15, and I do not like that. And now we have the 1, 2, 3, 4 concurrency. Yippee! And we get another mileage line with just the same control cities as we saw on US 23 Independent. And we're now going to be joining with US 82 here, and we get another error shield. Funny. Now we're meeting with US Highway 84 here in the heart of Waycross as 84 West is being signed for Valdosta, which definitely is an awesome choice. And well, look at that. We get a third error shield here as we get US 1, US 23, US 82, and US 84 all on the same road here. And here's where we split off from US 82 and 84 as US 1 and 23 are going to be heading towards Folkston and Jacksonville here. And once we meet with US Highway 301, we are now going to be concurrent with it as we head towards Folkston and Jacksonville, which are definitely good choices. Hey, look at that! We hit the jackpot of highways. We have US 1, US 23, Georgia 23, Georgia 4, Georgia 15, 121, and US Highway 301. Interesting how US 23 and Georgia 23 are now concurrent with each other. And after going through Folkston, we're now entering into the state of Florida, and this is actually a really cool welcome sign, FDOT. And this here is in Callahan, and I could not get a good view of the intersection here, so I had to jump onto some sort of parking lot just to get this good view. I did not really enjoy it. And after once 301 splits off from us, we're now getting signed for Jacksonville on the top line and Daytona Beach now as our primary from 103 miles away. I mean, to be fair, St. Augustine and Daytona Beach are one's control cities beyond Jacksonville because US 23 ends in Jacksonville. What else are you going to sign? The Atlantic Ocean? And on the outskirts of Jacksonville, we're meeting with Interstate 295 here, and let us see what we're signed for on Interstate 295. We just get 1 and 23 South, which I think is an alright choice because we're about to enter into downtown Jacksonville. Also, this was my own picture when I went through the Jacksonville area back in November, so yay. So here's where US 1 splits off from US Highway 23 in the Jacksonville area, as we're going to be heading into town along a freeway here. And here we meet with Interstate 95, and just like going northbound on US 1, we get no control city for 95. And here we reunite with US Highway 17, and US 1 and 17 are now going to be heading through downtown Jacksonville. Hey, look at that! We meet US Highway 23 once again. And we're going to be still heading south towards US 90. In fact, here's that said meeting with US Highway 90, and US 1 and 90 are now going to be concurrent. In fact, here we join with Interstate 95 for a brief concurrency as we're going to be heading towards Jacksonville Beaches and Daytona Beach. And here is where we split off from both Interstate 95 and US 90, as we're now just being signed south for Phillips Highway, which again makes sense because if you saw on the map earlier, we are now basically just paralleling Interstate 95 as we head through the southern Jacksonville suburbs. Here we meet with Interstate 295 on the south side of Jacksonville. And I decided to skip all the way down to St. Augustine because there's not really much interesting on US 1. And here's where we meet the Florida A18 in the St. Augustine area. Now we're meeting with Interstate 95 in the St. Augustine area as it just gets the same control cities of Miami and Jacksonville. And here we get another mileage sign with Daytona as our primary from 37 miles away. And here in the Daytona Beach area, we meet with US 92 as it's getting the same control cities that we saw on northbound US 1. And here we meet with Florida Highway 400, once again we'll take you over to Interstate 4. And here you are meeting Florida Highway 50 in Titusville or Titusville. And we're now passing by Florida Highway 405, which will take you over to the Kennedy Space Center. So if anyone likes space exploration or rockets, this exit's for you. And on that road, we are now getting signed south for Cocoa Beach, which I think is an awesome choice. Here in the Cocoa Beach area, we meet with US Highway 192, and it just gets the same control cities like going northbound on US 1. And here we meet with Florida Highway 60 here, as we're going to be heading through this beach town. Here we meet with Florida Highway 70, and we can see that there's a mileage sign up ahead. It looks like we're now getting signed for Stewart from 17 miles away. And after going through Stewart, we now get Jupiter as our primary from 16 miles away. And then a few miles down the road, we're now passing through downtown West Palm Beach. And still in the West Palm Beach area, we meet with US 98 along with Florida Highway 80 here. And this subway looks actually very interesting. And here we are going through another downtown as we head closer towards Fort Lauderdale. And here we meet with Interstate 595 and the same stuff as we saw on northbound US 1. Here we have a picture of a US 1 South reassurance shield taken by Ryan Golden. Dick took this picture while they were staying in the Fort Lauderdale area back in December of 2024. So thank you for this cool picture. And then here in the heart of Miami, we meet with Interstate 195, and hey, it looks like FDOT does have the tendency to sign US 27 going this direction. So that's awesome. Here we meet with Interstate 395, along with Florida Highway A1A once again. And here we meet with US Highway 41, still in the heart of Miami. And this here is the ending of Interstate 95, and sadly we do not have a direct access to it going for northbound 95, going southbound on 1. And on our way out of Miami, we pass by Florida Highway 9 once again. Strange how there's a Florida 9B and a Florida 9, but they're like really far apart from each other. And here we cross under the Florida's Turnpike in the southern Miami exurbs. And like Interstate 95, it's just a wide junction when we meet the southern ending of the Florida Turnpike. And now we can see that US 1 is now getting signed south for Key West, all the way down here in deep south Miami. And we can see that we're still another 106 miles out from our southern terminus. That is a pretty long drive. And on our way to Key West, we actually passed by Fred the Tree here, growing along this old pedestrian bridge. And then we finally made it to Key West, where we have a Welcome to Key West sign, so that is awesome. Here we got another request. This one was made by At Work Station. He wanted to see the green parrot bar off of US 1 here in Key West, because He's been here a couple of times, and plus it's the last bar on US Highway 1 before its southern terminus. So thank you for that request. And we made it to the southern terminus of US Highway 1, and we do get an End US 1 shield, so that is pretty awesome. And it looks like that there's a little cool store to buy US 1 souvenirs. I definitely want to check that place out whenever I visit Key West. So after traveling all 2,300 miles of US 1, we end here in Key West and we move on to the way it should be on US 1 southbound. So these are all the places that I think should be signed on 1 going south. First off, starting off with Madawaska, then Van Buren, Presque Isle, Holton, then Calais, Ellsworth, Belfast, Rockland, Brunswick, Portland, Scarborough, Biddeford, Kennebunk, Kittery, Portsmouth, Hampton, Seabrook, Newburyport, Peabody, Boston, Quincy, Norwood, Foxborough, Attleboro, Pawtucket, Providence, Warwick, Newport, Charlestown, Westerly, Stonington, New London, East Lyme, Old Saybrook, Clinton, Madison, Guilford, New Haven, Milford, Bridgeport, Norwalk, Stamford, Greenwich, Portchester, New Rochelle, New York City, Newark, New Brunswick, Princeton, Trenton, Philly, Media, Kennett Square, Oxford, then Bel Air, Baltimore, Elkridge, Laurel, College Park, the Great DC, Alexandria, Woodbridge, Fredericksburg, Ashland, Richmond, Chester, Petersburg, Dinwiddie, South Hill, Norlina, Henderson, then Raleigh, Sanford, Southern Pines, Rockingham, Cheraw, Camden, Elgin, Columbia, Lexington, Batesburg, Leesville, Aiken, Augusta, Rennes, Louisville, Swainsboro, Lyons, Baxley, Waycross, Folkestone, Callahan, the Jacks, St. Augustine, Bunnell, Daytona Beach, Titusville, Cocoa, Melbourne, Vero Beach, Fort Pierce, Stewart, West Palm Beach, Boca Raton, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, Miami, Florida City, then the Florida Keys, and finally Key West. Thank you all so much for watching the US Highway 1 series. It was really fun doing this highway for my birthday. And it is a really cool road, and is one that is really close to me and dear to my heart. So here are my next 2 highways. If you have any extra requests for any of these upcoming highways besides the special gimmick video, please let me know down in the comment section below and I'll make sure to shout you out once these highways release. Also, the US 301 southbound requests are closed too, but all the other ones are open. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all next week when we do US 301.